A pseudonym is a name that a person or group assumes for a particular purpose, which can differ from his or her original or true name. Pseudonyms include stage names, screen names, ring names, pen names, nicknames, aliases, superhero identities and code names, gamer identifications, and regnal names of emperors, popes, and other monarchs. Historically, they have often taken the form of anagrams, Grayicisms, and Latinizations, although there are many other methods of choosing a pseudonym. Pseudonyms are most usually adopted to hide an individual's real identity, as with writers' pen names, graffiti artists' tags, resistance fighters or terrorists' noms de guerre, and computer hackers' handles. Actors, musicians, and other performers sometimes use stage names, for example, to mask their ethnic backgrounds. In some cases, pseudonyms are adopted because they are part of a cultural or organizational tradition. For example, devotional names used by members of some religious institutes, and cadre names used by Communist Party leaders such as Trotsky and Lenin. A pseudonym may also be used for personal reasons. For example, an individual may prefer to be called or known by a name that differs from their given or legal name, but is not ready to take the numerous steps to get their name legally changed, or an individual may simply feel that the context and content of an exchange offer no reason, legal or otherwise, to provide their given or legal name. A collective name or collective pseudonym is one shared by two or more persons, for example the co-authors of a work, such as Illyrie Queen, or Nicholas Bourbaki. Etymology. The term is derived from the Greek psi epsilon upsilon delta omega nu upsilon mu omicron nu, literally, false name, from psi epsilon delta omicron sigma, lie, falsehood, and nu omicron mu alpha, name. A pseudonym is distinct from an allonym, which is the name of another person, assumed by the author of a work of art. This may occur when someone is ghostwriting a book or play, or in parody, or when using a front name, such as by screenwriters blacklisted in Hollywood in the 1950s and 1960s. See also pseudepigraph for falsely attributed authorship, concealment of identity. Literary pen names. A pen name is a pseudonym adopted by an author. Many pen names are used to conceal the author's identity. One famous example of this is Samuel Clemens writing under the pen name Mark Twain. A pen name may be used if a writer's real name is likely to be confused with the name of another writer or notable individual, or if their real name is deemed to be unsuitable. Authors who write both fiction and non-fiction, or in different genres, may use different pen names to avoid confusing their readers, as in the case of mathematician Charles Dodgson, who wrote fantasy novels under the pen name Lewis Carroll and mathematical treatises under his own name. Some authors, such as Harold Robbins, used several literary pseudonyms. The Bronte family used pen names for their early work, so as not to reveal their gender and so that local residents would not know that the books related to people of the neighborhood. The Brontes used their neighbors as inspiration for characters in many of their books. Anne Bronte published The Tenant of Wildfell Hall under the name Acton Bell. Charlotte Bronte published Shirley and Jane Eyre under the name Currer Bell. Emily Bronte published Wuthering Heights as Ellis Bell. Some female authors used male pen names, in particular in the 19th century, when writing was a male-dominated profession. In contrast, some 20th and 21st century male romance novelists have used female pen names. A well-known example of the former is Mary Ann Evans, who wrote as George Eliot. Another example is Amandine Aurore Lucille Dupin, a 19th-century French writer who used the pen name George Sand. Jane Austen used the pseudonym A Lady as the author of her first novel Sense and Sensibility. A few examples of male authors using female pseudonyms include Brindle Chase, Peter O'Donnell and Christopher Wood. Some pen names are not strictly pseudonyms, as they are simply variants of the author's actual names. The authors C. L. Moore and S. E. Hinton were female authors who used the initialized forms of their full names in order to disguise their gender and attract various types of readers, without creating expectations about the content of their work due to some readers' gender-related stereotypes. C.L. Moore was Catherine Lucille Moore, who wrote in the 1930s male-dominated science fiction genre, and S. E. Hinton is Susan Eloise Hinton. Star Trek writer D. C. Fontana wrote using her abbreviated own name and also under the pen names Michael Richards and J. Michael Bingham. Author V.C. Andrews intended to publish under her given name of Virginia Andrews, but was told that, due to a production error, her first novel was being released under the name of V.C. Andrews. Later she learned that the publisher had done this deliberately to increase her book's appeal for male readers. Joanne Kathleen Rowling published the Harry Potter series under the shortened name J.K. Rowling. Rowling also published a detective novel, The Cuckoo's Calling, under the pseudonym Robert Galbraith. Winston Churchill wrote under the pen name Winston S. Churchill in an attempt to avoid confusion with the American novelist of the same name. In this case, the attempt was not entirely successful, and the two are still sometimes confused by booksellers. A pen name may be used specifically to hide the identity of the author, as in the case of exposé books about espionage or crime, or explicit erotic fiction. Some prolific authors adopt a pseudonym to disguise the extent of their published output, e.g., Stephen King writing as Richard Berkman. Co-authors may choose to publish under a collective pseudonym, e.g., J. Tracy and Perry O'Shaughnessy. Frederick Danny and Manfred Lee used the name Ellery Queen as both a pen name for their collaborative works and as the name of their main character. A famous case in French literature was Romain Gary. Already a well-known and highly acclaimed writer, he started publishing books under the pen name Émile Ajar. He wanted to test whether his new books would be well received on their own merits and without the aid of his established reputation, and they were. Émile Ajar, like Romain Gary before him, was awarded the prestigious Prix Goncourt by a jury unaware that both were the same person. Similarly, Ronnie Barker submitted comedy material under the name of Gerald Wiley. A collective pseudonym may represent an entire publishing house, or any contributor to a long-running series, especially with juvenile literature. Examples include Watty Piper, Victor Appleton, Aaron Hunter, and Cameron M. Exhan. Another use of a pseudonym in literature is to present a story as being written by the fictional characters in the story. The series of novels known as A Series of Unfortunate Events are written by Daniel Handler under the pen name of Lemony Snicket, a character in the series. An anonymity pseudonym or multiple-use name is a name used by many different people to protect anonymity. It is a strategy that has been adopted by many unconnected radical groups and bicultural groups, where the construct of personal identity has been criticized. This has led to the idea of the open pop star, aliases, fictitious business names, and dummy corporations in criminal activity. Criminals may use aliases, fictitious business names, and dummy corporations to hide their identity, or to impersonate other persons or entities in order to commit fraud. Aliases and fictitious business names used for dummy corporations may become so complex that, in the words of the Washington Post, getting to the truth requires a walk down a bizarre labyrinth, and multiple government agencies may become involved to uncover the truth. While governor of Alaska, Sarah Palin used a private Yahoo email account to skirt government transparency laws. While director of the EPA, Lisa Jackson set up a false identity named Richard Windsor in order to use an official EPA.gov email account that was not linked to her office. Richard Windsor was awarded certificates for completing training in ethical behavior and email management. Noms de guerre in ancient regime France. A nom de guerre would be adopted by each new recruit as he enlisted in the French army. These pseudonyms had an official character and were the predecessor of identification numbers. Soldiers were identified by their first names, their family names, and the Noms De Guerre. These pseudonyms were usually related to the soldier's place of origin, or to a particular physical or personal trait. In 1716, a nom de guerre was mandatory for every soldier. Officers did not adopt noms de guerre as they considered them derogatory. In daily life, these aliases could replace the real family name. Noms de guerre were adopted for security reasons by members of the World War II French resistance and Polish resistance. Such pseudonyms are often adopted by military special forces soldiers, such as members of the SHASH and other similar units, resistance fighters, terrorists, and guerrillas. This practice hides their identities and may protect their families from reprisals. It may also be a form of dissociation from domestic life. Some well-known men who adopted noms de guerre include Carlos the Jackal, Farilich Ramirez Sanchez, Willy Brandt, Chancellor of West Germany, and Subcomandante Marcos, the spokesman of the Zapatista Army of National Liberation, during Lay's underground fight against the British in Mandatory Palestine. The organization's commander Yitzhak Shamir adopted the nom de guerre, Michael, in honor of Ireland's Michael Collins. Revolutionaries and resistance leaders, such as Lenin, Trotsky, Golda Meir, Philippe Leclerc de Hauteclerc, and Josip Broz, often adopted their noms de guerre as their proper names after the struggle. George Grivas, the Greek Cypriot aka militant, adopted the nom de guerre Digenise. In the French Foreign Legion, recruits can adopt a pseudonym to break with their past lives. Mercenaries have long used noms de guerre, even sometimes multiple identities depending on country, conflict and circumstance. Computer users, individuals using a computer online may adopt or be required to use a form of pseudonym known as if handle, username, login name, avatar, or, sometimes, screen name, or nickname. On the Internet, pseudonymous remailers utilize cryptography that achieves persistent pseudonymity, so that two-way communication can be achieved, and reputations can be established, without linking physical identities to their respective pseudonyms. Aliasing is the use of multiple names for the same data location. More sophisticated cryptographic systems, such as anonymous digital credentials, enable users to communicate pseudonymously. In well-defined abuse cases, a designated authority may be able to revoke the pseudonyms and reveal the individual's real identity. Use of pseudonyms is common among professional esports players, despite the fact that most professional games are played offline. Business salespeople of ethnic minorities in some areas of the world are sometimes told by an employer to use a pseudonym that is common or acceptable in that part of the world when conducting business, as some people might prefer a person of similar ethnic origin or similar background to people of foreign background or foreign ethnicity. Privacy. People seeking privacy often use pseudonyms to make appointments and reservations. Those writing to advice columns in newspapers and magazines may use pseudonyms. Steve Wozniak used a pseudonym when attending the University of California, Berkeley after co-founding Apple Computer because, he said, "I knew I wouldn't have time enough to be an A+ student." Establishment of identity. The practice of assigning patrilineal and matrilineal names to offspring for the purpose of tracing ancestry or determining inheritance and other relationships may be giving way to a 21st century preference for self-assigned or quality-assigned names as replacements for birth-given names. A common practice of many indigenous peoples was to assign a clan or shamanic name to members in puberty and post-puberty rituals. It is becoming more common for modern authors and others to elect to take names better suited to their own tastes, characters, or other aspects of personal description or preference. In most legal systems, a name assumed for a non-fraudulent purpose is a legal name and usable as the person's true name. This is distinct from, though not exclusive of, employing a pseudonym for the purpose of concealment.